that P.T. Barnum, the guy notorious for the world's greatest circus and also, exploiting people with disabilities for money for his weird freak shows, was very, very passionate about banning condoms in the state of Connecticut? Did you know that in ancient civilizations, people used crocodile dung as birth control? The history of birth control has not just modernly been taboo. It's been taboo this entire time. And that's because since the beginning of time, women have been trying to figure out ways how to not get pregnant. And some of those ideas were really smart. Other ideas were downright disgusting and painful. So today, I'm going to be talking about my favorite taboo facts from the history of birth control. Let's start from the very beginning. In ancient civilizations like in ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, there were different ways that women thought they could not get pregnant. But luckily for women, if you didn't want a baby back then, you had some choices. Some pretty bad choices. One of the first ever found forms of birth control was crocodile dung pessaries. Now, pessaries are pretty much like a suppository, and if you know what a suppository is, then you probably know where this kind of birth control goes. They would mix dung of different mythical animals, such as crocodiles and elephants, with honey and into a little dried ball thing, and then insert it where the sun doesn't shine. And let's get one thing clear. They didn't do this because it worked. They did this because no one was stopping them. But honestly, as gross as it may sound, I would rather do that than what they did in ancient Rome. In ancient Rome and in ancient China, there is archaeological evidence to show that many women had a different approach to birth control. Mercury and lead ingestion. In ancient China, they would drink mercury in order to try to sterilize themselves so that they wouldn't become pregnant. And then in Rome, it was recommended to women actually that if they didn't want to get pregnant, they would drink from the water that blacksmiths use to cool off their molten weaponry, which a lot of times contained lead. There were a lot of other medicinal ways, including different herbs and roots that were used back then in order to prevent pregnancy that were more effective and safe. Not fully safe, but more safe. But the way that ancient civilizations always used mercury and lead as a cure-all never fails to make me giggle a little bit. Come on. There's gotta be a correlation here between people who drink mercury and people who die. Now, the good news here is that this was proven to be highly effective because you can't have children if you are dead. I guess task failed successfully. And in ancient Greece, they believed that if life gave you lemons, put them up your vajayjay. That's right, women in ancient Greece actually used halved lemon wedges as cervical caps. This one does have some logic to it because the acidity of a lemon would make it kind of difficult for sperm cells to survive in the vaginal canal. But at the same time, I don't think I want to know how that felt or if it burned, and for both parties, I feel like that would just not be comfortable. In medieval Europe, they actually believed that if you took the testicles of a weasel and tied them around your inner thigh, it would protect you from having an unwanted child. This really just proves that women would try anything in order to not get pregnant. Now, as time went on, people began to kind of correlate that sperm cells resulted in pregnancy. So we decided that if we can prevent the sperm cells from entering the uterus, then we probably won't get pregnant. Hence the earliest form of condoms. They were actually made of animal intestines. There's also record of early condoms being made of reptile skins, like snake skins and fish scales and things like that, but I think animal intestines were definitely the most common way that people created condoms. So we're gonna shoot forward a few hundred years to the year 1800, where vulcanized rubber is invented. Now, as soon as rubber was pretty much vulcanized and we figured out how to make it safe and sterile, it was over. We decided that that's what we were going to use for contraceptives. Condoms, diaphragms, and cervical caps weren't just hodgepodge nasty things that people inserted and hoped would work, like crocodile dung and lemons and who knows what else. But they were soon somewhat sterile and mass-produced. And just when you think that humanity is getting a grip and sex would be suddenly a little bit less terrifying, a man named Anthony Comstock had to ruin it for absolutely everyone. I'm going to be talking about laws prohibiting birth control and contraceptives in the United States, mostly because I am from the United States, so this is a little history of that. As for other countries, I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know. The Comstock Act, enacted in 1873, was a series of federal laws that broadly restrict the mailing of obscene or lewd materials, including those related to contraceptions and abortions. In the late 19th and 20th centuries, the Comstock Act was used to prosecute individuals and organizations involved in distributing information to women who wanted information about birth control. Now we're getting even more hyper-specific, because what I learned from making a video about P.T. Barnum and the atrocities that he created, he became really inspired by the Comstock laws. Now, he didn't have a problem exploiting people with disabilities for his own benefit, but he did have a problem with condoms. And I'm gonna be honest, if I looked like this, maybe I would be mad about birth control too, because I don't think he was getting any. P.T. Barnum actually banned the distribution or sales or even owning anything that could be used for sexual pleasure or contraceptives, as kind of an addition to these obscenity laws in the state of Connecticut. P.T. Barnum's law also prohibited the use of any kind of drug being used as birth control, and chemical birth control hadn't even really been invented yet. He pretty much said, hey, so whenever you guys do invent a medicine that prevents unwanted births, whenever you do make that, it's not allowed in my state. Why are we banning something that doesn't even really exist yet? Nothing says family values like a man who profited off of putting literal children in cages. This basically went on until 1914, when a woman named Margaret Sanger coined the term birth control and decided to educate the public about contraceptives. She created what was called a birth control clinic and was actually jailed for this. The court convicted Sanger of maintaining a public nuisance by dispensing contraceptive devices and sentenced her to jail for 30 days. But once she was released, Sanger reopened her clinic and just kept doing what she was born to do. In the 1920s, most churches, whether they be Catholic or Protestant, started the war on birth control. It wasn't until the 1930s where the Anglican Church said, okay, fine, you can use birth control sometimes if you're married. And then people started to get a little bit more relaxed about it. People who were part of different denominations of Protestant faith began using birth control methods more regularly, but the Catholic Church was still completely not cool with it. On New Year's Eve of the year 1930, the Vatican declared that any method of contraception to be a mortal sin. Condoms, diaphragms, spermicides, douching. Yeah, douching. That's kind of weird, but it's still a sin, apparently. Basically, the ideology that the Catholic Church put out was that any form of sperm was considered sacred and holy seed, and tampering with that sperm's journey to the egg was considered a sin. The Catholic Church believed that the only safe way to practice safe sex was the completely unreliable rhythm method, aka only reserving sexual activity for the few weeks of the woman's cycle where she is infertile. And if you've ever tried to strictly schedule sexual activity in between ovulation windows, you know that it's completely natural, in the ways that droughts are natural. In the year 1953, two biologists named Dr. Gregory Pincus and Dr. John Rock decided that they were going to take birth control into their own hands, because despite all of this lobbying and all of these organizations for the use of Americans to have contraceptives, people were still getting persecuted at the state level for using condoms and other things like that. Finally, medical science caught up to what women have been trying to do since the days of crocodile shit. Now, what's interesting about these biologists is that Dr. John Rock was actually a Catholic himself, and so when he created the birth control pill, that what we know today as the combined pill, he used two hormones that women already had in their bodies, progesterone and estrogen. Catholic Church's logic is that you can't interfere with sperm trying to travel to an egg because that was sinful. That was getting in the way of God's design. But by giving women hormones that they already have in their body to better regulate their cycles, that's a loophole. And I find this absolutely hilarious, mostly because in today's day and age, birth control is still taboo and people are still trying to regulate different forms of hormonal birth control. Like you see, especially a lot of conservative lawmakers trying to bar the use of IUDs, hormonal IUDs, and Nexplanon, which is really interesting because back when birth control was heavily argued and heavily regulated, the only birth control that you could get that was natural natural was considered a hormonal birth control, and the things that we don't even really care about regulating today, like condoms, were illegal. So make that make sense. But there was one design flaw with the pill that is so funny to me. When you take progesterone and estrogen combined, you don't get a period. The Catholic Church was convinced that this was horrible. Hence the invention of the sugar pill week. If you're a woman who takes hormonal birth control, you probably know what the sugar pill week is. You get a set of like 30-ish pills in a pack, and the last week are placebos. They don't do anything. The only thing that they do is they give you a breakthrough bleed, which most women are like, oh, it's my period. They'll just say it's their period. But in reality, it's not actually a period. It's a withdrawal of estrogen and progesterone, which causes your hormone levels to drop, which causes blood to come out of your uterus. That's right. The original hormonal birth control pill did not have a sugar week. Women who took this pill did not get a period. And the breakthrough bleeding week, where you get your pseudo period, if you're on hormonal birth control, is completely unnecessary. The only reason it got invented was because these biologists wanted to make this pill seem more natural and less evil to the Catholic Church. Because the men in charge of laws felt that it would be more natural and women would feel more like themselves if they had a fake period. Because going 30 days without bleeding profusely through your holes and having terrible cramps was just not in the cards for these Catholic lawmakers. Upon hearing that this pill actually had medical benefits for women, like regulating their cycles and easing their cramps, the Vatican briefly decided to let the pill slide for medical reasons. But then in 1968, they doubled down and said, no, this is too artificial, you can't have it. But the issue with that is, from 1957 to 1967, the Vatican was kind of okay with women using the pill for health benefits only. So now, very many Catholic women had been already taking the pill for around a decade before the Vatican decided that it was evil again. Naturally, most of them just kept taking it. By the 1960s, the combined birth control pill was the most popular form of contraceptive in all of America, whether the women were Catholic or not. Because even the Pope can't stop you from hating the phrase, "I'm pregnant." Again, before you start to think that this is just a women's issue, I also want you to consider that there have been trials for male birth control pills since the 1970s up into the 20-teens, but none of them have ever existed. I don't know about you, but it seems like it makes more sense to just unload the gun before shooting it at a person, rather than to shoot a loaded gun at someone wearing a bulletproof vest. None of these male hormonal birth control pills have ever made it past the testing phase, because the men didn't like the side effects. Oh, what side effects? Like, do you go like completely bald and like all your organs turn inside out? No. You get acne and weight gain. Men who were a part of these hormonal birth control trials complained that they had acne, irritability, weight gain, and constipation issues. And that's the main reason that it never hit the market. People were convinced that because of these little side effects, men just wouldn't take the pill. And if you want to know why I find that ridiculous, this is what a pamphlet of side effects and warnings looks like in an FDA-approved standard birth control pill. So even though hormonal birth control pills for men are 100% possible, apparently a little bit of mild discomfort and symptoms that women have to deal with every single month anyway are like a human rights violation. As a woman, would you not want to do more adult activities if you know that you were on the pill and the guy you were doing it with was also on the pill as well? It's like double protection there. That's just my take on it. These are my wildest facts about birth control and the contraceptive industry. My name is Melody. This channel is called Melody Ever After. I've got all sorts of videos on all sorts of commentary topics on here, and I'd really appreciate it if you checked me out. Until next time.